breath settle. Fold your palms, close your eyes. If you would like to chant, you can chant along with me. Om. 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 Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopa karotam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi abahu purushakaram shankachakra siddharinam sahasra shirasam shvetam pranamami patanjalim harihi om. Bring your attention to your breath. Release your arms, open your eyes. Sit with your legs stretched out and sit up on a block. And bend your left knee, bring that heel in as much as the knee will let you. Then push the heel down and stretch the knee forward. And at the same time, tilt your pelvis more forward. Try to bring the lower part of your spine a little bit in, a little further in. And in that way, gradually, you'll feel more weight coming into the left foot. And switch legs. Press the heel down and move the knee further forward. And meanwhile, you're trying to rotate your pelvis more towards your legs, more towards your right leg in particular, which should increase the weight in your right foot. Good, switch the legs again. Repeat all those steps. Press the heel down, push the knee forward, tip the pelvis forward. And this time, support with your right hand alongside your hip. Bring your left arm inside your left knee and catch the leg. And if you can reach comfortably the right foot, you can catch that. If that's not available, just catch hold of the leg somewhere. So you're going to flex your spine a little to get there, and then once you have hold of something, then try and get the spine as upright as you can. So your leg and your arm give you resistance, and meanwhile you're lifting up your trunk, stretching up through the crown of your head. And when you do that, you're going to feel even more pressure in that left foot. So just make sure that it's not causing a pain in your knee or your low back. And release that. Switch sides again. Heel down, knee forward, pelvis tipping forward. Support with the left hand, bring the right arm inside the right knee. And gradually walk the hand out toward the foot and just catch either the leg or the foot. It's nice if you can get hold of something so that you can pull against that. So your leg is staying active, you're pulling with your hand is holding, and then you're trying to lift up your trunk more. You're trying to get taller here. Which will demand more from your right hip and right ankle. Good, release that. Stretch out that leg. You can separate the feet. Sit on a height if you need one. Try to get the pelvis to fully upright. So if that's difficult, sitting on the floor, then sit higher. Then once again, support with your right hand to the outside of the right hip. Bring the left hand in front of the pelvis. Stretch your left leg, and from the left side of the pelvis, turn your pelvis around towards your right leg. Try not to overdo the rotation in the spine, and emphasize generating motion from your hips here. So the goal is to try to get the pelvis to turn around more, and not just to torque yourself around with the support of the arms. So it's not a big twist. It's not a lot of motion, and the more limited your hip is, the less you'll feel your pelvis is able to turn. But meanwhile, keep the legs active, especially the left leg. So you're stretching that leg, anchoring that thigh bone trying to turn the pelvis away from the left thigh bone. And come back to the center. You want the angle and the position of your legs as symmetrical as possible. So try to see if the legs are equally apart. And often what happens is we take one leg out further than the other as a habit, just because that hip has maybe more mobility than the other one. So you want to try to have the tighter side dictate how far the leg goes out. So I know, for instance, I always take my right leg out further than I do my left leg. So I need to bring my right leg generally a little more forward than I otherwise would. Then same arm support, stretching the right leg, turning the pelvis toward the left leg. Keeping the legs active, especially the right leg. Keeping the chin in, lifting the crown of the head up. And once again, just trying to create some separation there between the right thigh bone and the right side of the pelvis. And then back to center. You can bring your legs back in. Come off any height that you're sitting on. And just sit as upright as you can. If your hamstring length doesn't allow you to sit totally upright, just do the best that you can. And with your fingers facing forward, bring your hands alongside your hips and then walk the hands a little further back until you feel the heels of the palms just start to come off of the floor. Not more than just a little. And then draw the shoulders back, stretch open the upper chest, and reach the heels of the palms down. And meanwhile, you keep the legs working to maintain the pelvis in as upright a position as possible. Then take the hands a little further back, even just half an inch, and shoulders back, and you're reaching the heels of the palms down without taking the easy route to that, which is just to lean backwards. You're trying to stay upright, but take the hands further back to open up the upper part of the chest. Try to keep your fingers as wide as possible and your thumbs as far away from your index fingers as you can. So you're going to feel a lot of work here if you're doing this properly. You're going to feel your legs and arms really working a great deal to maintain the posture. And then you can release that, stretch the arms forward. Bend your knees, tip the pelvis and the trunk back. So you're in an easy variation of Navasana, Paripurna Navasana, boat pose. And before you make it any more challenging for yourself, try to get the head back and in line with the spine so that your head lines up with is at the angle of the trunk and not at the angle of the wall in front of you, which is the tendency. And when your head is in the correct position, you're going to feel your lower abdominals kick in a lot more, and you're going to feel your pressure down through your hips to support the weight of the trunk. Then from there, take the left foot under the right knee and come onto the left hip. Step the right foot back. You can just rest the right leg on the left lower leg for now. Bring your hand about 2 feet away from the hip, in line with the hip, and stretch the other arm opposite that. And then there's this adjustment that I've been mentioning periodically, which is on this left arm, you elevate the arm. So the whole arm, the upper arm and the forearm are sort of lifted away from the left ribs. And then you're rotating the upper arm out from the shoulder. And when you do that, you should feel your shoulder move back and the tension across the top of the shoulder blade decrease a little. Then with that fixed, using that to fix the arm, turn the trunk around to the right, or really more your chest and your head, and look at the right hand. So you're reaching out, and then stretch in both directions here by gradually increasing the weight in your left hip and decreasing, although not necessarily eliminating, the weight in your left hand. So your hand is still going to have some pressure on it, should still have some pressure on it, but can you take more of the weight, more of the support weight into your left hip, and then upright and turn the head from there. And we'll make a transition here. So you're going to come up off that hand, bring the hand forward, bring the forearm down, and then go onto your back with the legs and arms up. And in that position, feel your intra-abdominal pressure. Feel your diaphragm as it pushes down. Your abdominal muscles as they sort of expand and then kind of squeeze in against that pressure. And even the pelvic floor from the bottom lifting up. So you feel a lot of activation in the trunk, and that activation is manifesting as stability in your back. So the back stays very stable. And then you can test that stability carefully by lowering your left leg a little. And you should feel immediately the abdominal muscles kick in more. Bring that leg up. And then try it with the right leg. You don't have to move it very far to increase the activation. And if you don't feel your stabilizers working harder, then I would recommend you don't keep doing it because something isn't working right. So a little movement goes a long way here. Then from the symmetrical posture, look back to the left, turn your head, look, bring your humerus down, And then think about your left hip. As you come over, you're going to anchor that left hip down and activate the left side of the trunk to lift the trunk up and come back up into the side sitting position. And then from there back to Navasana. And then if you want to make it a little more challenging, you can lift your feet off the floor. And you can even stretch out your legs. Just make sure that the low back doesn't collapse. And if it does, you just keep your knees bent. And then right leg under, come onto the right hip. Go ahead and lower the left leg. Place your right hand in the line of the hip, about 2 feet out from the hip. Then elevate your right arm. Externally rotate the humerus, which again should bring the shoulder back and release some of the trapezius tension across the top of the shoulder girdle. And also fix that arm position so that when you turn your chest around, you're not dragging the shoulder around with it. And stretch the opposite arm. Try to create a similar feeling on the left side as well. So you're stretching the pectoral area, you're opening up the chest. But at the same time, and in a similar way, stretching, widening, and opening up the rhomboid area between the shoulder blades. Connect the uprighting of the head with the anchor of your of your right hip. So you want to feel that right hip pressing down more and your right hand pressing down a little bit less. But not give up the weight in the right hand entirely. At least not for the moment. Then by weighting the right hip, you unweight the right hand, bring that hand forward, bring the forearm down, and then from there go onto your back with the legs and arms up. If you need some height under your head, take a little bit of height under your head. You don't want to feel like your head is going back to a point where it's pulling your lower front ribs with it. So the lower front ribs should feel like they can stay anchored to the pelvis here. So you have that barrel shape in the trunk. And you want to feel a lot of tone all the way around the abdominal corset. And it should be a tone that doesn't collapse in as you breathe. So you'll tend to increase that activation, increase that tone when you inhale, but then often I see students, they exhale and then they collapse. And you want that tone and that activation to be there, whether you're inhaling or you're exhaling. And you can look back to the right side, bring the arm down. And then again, this right hip is going to quickly become your support. So as you come around, you're pushing into that hip and the obliques kick in and lift up the trunk, and then you're back to the side sitting position. And then back to Navasana. Any variation you like. And side sitting on the left again. This time, bring your right hand down alongside your hip. And And think of stretching your hand one way and the crown of your head opposite that. And as you reach through the crown of your head, you can turn the head around to the right. Then bend the right elbow, externally rotate the arm, which is going to bring the elbow forward, but more importantly, it's going to move the shoulder away from your neck. Maintain that space between the shoulder and the neck as you flex the shoulder, as you reach it upward over the head. Then reverse that. Bend, internally rotate, reach the arm away from the head. Bend, externally rotate, reach the arm over the head. And just repeat that. And then if you can, add to the reaching motion the lift of the pelvis. So your pelvis lifts off the floor. So there's that. So you're doing a kind of a side plank of sorts here. A little different arm position. And then you can add the stepping motion, so as you reach the arm and lift, the right leg is going to step around. You slide the left knee across your mat and come up into a kneeling lunge. You want your knees both to be slightly lateral to your hips. So if I look down, I can see my knee is a little wider than the vertical position of my hip. Keeping a neutral spine, sit back towards your left heel. Be careful not to go so far that it strains the knee. And then from there, shift your weight forward into your right hip and bring your hands to the floor inside your right foot. Keeping the head lifting away from the hands and the crown of the head reaching out toward the wall in front of you. So we're trying to get deeper into this right hip, and in order to do that, we need to make sure that we're not redistributing the load that would otherwise go into that hip into some other part of the body. Commonly what happens is the upper body rounds forward, and when I do that, now I'm taking some of the posture into my thoracic spine and decreasing the load on my hip. So the more you resist that, the more you try to keep your upper spine long and not allow the thoracic to round forward, the more you're going to feel pressure in that right groin, and the more, therefore, you're asking for the hip to do here. And keep your left hand down, lift your right hand so you're turning to the right, and you're going to step the right leg. You want to plant that foot so you have support there. Slide the left knee forward and then bring the hip down. So you're back to your side sitting position. And then back to boat, any variation. And then to the side sitting on the right. With the hand alongside the hip. So hand stretches away from the head stretches away from the hand. So there's that uprighting of the head again. And then with the left arm, I'm bending, externally rotating, which is going to bring the elbow in but pull the shoulder wider from the spine. I want to keep as much of that width as I can as I lift the arm. And bend it, internally rotate and stretch it opposite the head. Just repeat that a few times. Another thing to pay attention to, important thing to pay attention to, is as you're reaching the arm, make sure that it's not pulling your rib cage up with it. So your ribs should not follow your arm. The ribs should stay connected to the pelvis. And you also want the shoulder blade, that left shoulder blade, to stay anchored down onto your ribs here. And then you can add the lifting motion to the reach. So again, it's kind of like a little mini side plank here. And then you can add the stepping motion, so you reach, lift, step the left foot around, slide the right knee over, and then come up into the tripod. Again, this knee is a little bit out, the right knee is a little bit out. Arms forward. Most of my weight here, almost all of it, is in my right leg, right hip. Keeping a neutral spine, I'm hinging back toward my right heel. So that's going to load up my quadricep. So be careful that, don't go too low. And then come straight forward into the left hip. Watch that you don't round the upper back forward this way. But instead, keep the chest and the head away from the floor. And keep reaching out with the crown and uprighting the head. And the more you do that, the more you should feel that this posture rather loading that left hip. And the sensation of loading the left hip here is going to be felt as a pressure in the left groin. So what I'll have you do this time is step out of that and into a quadruped. And then from the quadruped, you can bring your hands a little more forward and your hips a little bit more forward, letting the tailbone release down and the pelvis upright to the rib cage. So you're in a plank, a kneeling version of a plank here, where the spine is neutral. And there's a lot of load in the shoulder girdle that you want to respond to by, once again, lifting your chest and your head away from the floor, not letting the weight of the shoulder girdle collapse down. And keeping your spine neutral, stretch the hips back. So don't collapse here. Keep the head, the chin tucked in, the neck long, the shoulder blades down. Keep your breath in your back. Keep the lower abdominal muscles activated. You want to feel it in your hips and not in your back. And then forward, back to kneeling plank. Then bring the knees just a little closer, like an inch closer to the hands. And then with your arms, pull your chest through and reach the crown of the head forward and up. So you extend the upper spine, take it into a little bit of a back bend. Then restore the neutral posture. So you're back to kneeling plank, for just a moment, and then squatting back again with your hips. And then once more to kneeling plank. Again, bring the knees a little bit more forward, and then pull the chest through, lift the crown of the head up, extend the upper spine, and then back to the kneeling plank, and then once more back into the prone squat. So that's a good way to practice that little sequence. If you want to ramp it up a little bit, if it's not too much for you, you can do a full plank, and then from the full plank you can use your feet to bring the hips a little bit more forward, and then extend the spine from there. And then back to the full plank, and then from there to downward facing dog. Then bend the knees into bear. Walk your feet to your hands. And squat briefly. And then come all the way up. So from a standing position, you'll stretch the arms apart and widen again the upper back and the upper chest. As you reach out, rotate the arms out. And as you reach out, also create space in the mid-back, and into that space, let the lower ribs drop. Let the ribs fall into that space in the back. So you feel your ribs moving away from your head and not towards your head here. And from there, lower the arms and bring your palms together into Namaste. And then lift the arms. And here again, as you lift the arms, don't lift the rib cage up. Let the ribs stay down. So that lift of the arm stretches the chest. And then lift your eyes up towards your hands. Try to lift from your eyes more than from your neck. Then bend forward. First with your knees straight, and when you hit your end range, your hamstring length, end range, bend your knees and squat to bring the palms down. Then take the feet back, either into full plank or into the kneeling plank. So it's your choice. Either one is fine. And then from the plank, whatever plank version you're doing, you're going to bring the hips a little bit more forward, move the chest forward, and lift the crown of the head up and extend the spine. So you've got your upward dog variation here. And then back to the neutral posture for a moment. And then from there into downward facing dog. Then you bend the knees and walk in. So you're squatting briefly. And then straighten the legs and come up. Lift the arms and reach up. And lift the eyes. And then lower the arms. Then reach the arms to the sides, widen the chest, widen the back, drop the ribs. Inhale. Exhale to namaste. Lift the arms and the eyes up. Inhale. Exhale, bend forward with straight knees, and then bend the knees into a squat to bring the hands down. Step the feet back into your plank variation. Then bring the hips forward, extend the spine into upward facing dog. Back to the plank for a moment, and then to downward facing dog. Then bend the knees, bring the feet forward into your squat. Then straighten the knees and come up, reach the arms up. Lift the eyes. Don't lift the ribs. And then release the arms down. Inhale, widen. Exhale to namaste. Inhale, lengthen upwards. Exhale, forward. Bring the hands down. Inhale. Exhale back. And again, inhale, upward dog variation. Back to the plank. And then back to downward facing dog. Bend the knees, bring the feet forward. Inhale. Good. And come up, reach up. And exhale, release the arms. Alright, do a forward bend. Let's do it this way with the arms at your sides. And your knees straight. And you're hinging forward from your hips as much as possible here. And you can, again, use these cues of, this cue rather, of stretching the hands and the head in opposite directions. So that'll help prevent you from just rounding your upper back forward, which is a tendency. And then you can come up from there. Good. Stand in the center of your mat. Bring the arms forward. Bend the knees. Step or hop the feet apart. So you've got 3.5, maybe 4 feet there. Then align your feet to the right. Align your heels. Make sure that the right knee is rotating out, left thigh bone is rotating out. Stretch your legs, stretch your arms, lift up your spine. Inhale, exhale, bend to the right. Reach your right hand towards your ankle. Push into your left heel and stretch the crown of the head away from that heel as you turn the head around to look up at your left hand. And widen your chest and your upper back as you upright your head here. And come up and reverse that. Again, make sure the thigh bones are rotating out, especially the left leg. Inhale, exhale, bend to that side. So you're reaching down and up here at the same time, pushing into that back leg, stretching the crown of the head away from there. In other words, uprighting the head as you turn the head around to look up. So you want to feel that connection, you want to make that and maintain that connection between the back leg and the head position here. Good, and come up. Turn the feet in, bring the feet together, release the arms. Good, take your block, put the block in front of you and to your right. And again, arms forward. Bend the knees so you can step or hop the feet apart, either one's fine. Align your feet to your right. You can keep the knee a little bit bent here. You're going to bend it anyways. We're going to be doing Parshvakonasana, side angle pose. Make sure that that knee is clearly rolling out and not in. And then stretch the arms, stretch the back leg as you begin to sit with the right hip. And then rotate the pelvis around that right hip joint and bring your arm inside the knee. Embrace that knee with your arm. Stretch your hand, your left hand away from your head. Stretch the head away from the hand. And turn the head around as you upright it. And then bend, rotate, and reach that top arm without lifting the ribs or the shoulder blade with the arm. So keep your ribs anchored to your back leg and to your left hip. Keep your shoulder blade anchored to your ribs. Meanwhile, just keep uprighting and turning the head around. And reverse the top arm and come up. You can take the block with you. Reverse the legs. Inhale. Exhale, bend the front leg. Make sure the knee's rolling out and not in. Then rotate around that hip. Stretch the right hand away from the head, head away from the hand. Make sure you're bracing the left knee. Don't let the left knee fall in here. Start to turn the head around. And then bend, rotate, and reach that top arm without pulling the rib cage or the shoulder blade with it. And just keep uprighting and turning the head around. Then reverse the top arm. Inhale and come up, turn your feet parallel, bend the knees, join the feet, release the arms. So we'll do another forward bend. You can start it the way that you did the last one. But this time, once you're near your end range, transfer your hands onto the support. Or onto a support. And you can adjust the height of that support as necessary. And then remember the two things that you want to do with the support and the one thing that you don't want to do with the support. The one thing you don't want to do with the support is lean into it. So make sure you're not using your block or whatever your support is as a weight-bearing tool. Keep the weight in your legs, especially in your heels. The two things that you do want to do with the support: one, use the arm, use it to help upright your head so that you're not rounding your upper spine. And two, use it to push into, to activate your abdominal muscles and your trunk stabilizers. And as your abdominal muscles activate, lift the sit bones higher and tip the pelvis gradually more forward to drop the trunk lower. Meanwhile, let eyes, ears, and tongue soften. Relax your jaw. Make space around the shoulder girdle and the neck. Keep the shoulders wide. Keep the neck long. Lift the shoulder blades, pull the shoulder blades away from your skull. And release the tops of the shoulder blades release the back of the skull away from the tops of the shoulder blades. Again, let eyes, ears, and tongue soften. Keep the knees very, very straight. When you come up a little slowly. Continue to keep the knees straight as you upright. Let your breath normalize. Then do another squat. And this time, go to bear for a moment. And then turn around your support arm and come back to side sitting. And then from side sitting back to Upavishta Konasana. Bend your left knee, bring your left heel in toward the front of the pelvis. And you want to position yourself in such a way that this doesn't hurt your knee. So that's the most important thing. You shouldn't have pain in your knee. And if it bothers your knee, make sure you sit high enough that it doesn't bother your knee. And if necessary, put a support under your knee. I want you to be able to push that knee either into the floor or into a support without it feeling like you're going to hurt it when you do that. And then as you push, you're turning your pelvis around toward the right leg. So this is like what we did earlier in Upavishtakonasana, but just with the knee bent rather than with the knee straight. If no matter what you do, it hurts your knee to do this, then just do it with the knee straight. Just repeat it as you did before. And then you can reverse that. So this leg anchors you. You push, you turn, and then you can increase the turn this time, so you're doing a little bit more of a spinal rotation on top of the hip motion. Back to center, go ahead and stretch out that leg. And if you can, bring the hands into the front and walk them forward and bend forward a little bit here. Be sure to keep your legs active. Bend your knees, join your feet, Baddha Konasana. Feel free to sit higher if that helps. Also feel free to take the support of the arms behind you so you can get your pelvis more upright and take away any pressure on your low back. And that will also allow you to open the space up between your pubic bone and your navel so that doesn't scrunch in there. So that's an important feature of the posture. You want to be able to open that space up. Because once you can get that abdominal space open, then you can use your intra-abdominal pressure and those abdominal muscles to begin to provide the support that you're currently providing with your arms. So that would be the next step, which is to begin to see if you can use your stabilizing action to hold the pelvis upright to the trunk so it doesn't collapse back, and decrease the reliance on the arms to do that. And it just so happens that successfully stabilizing that way will also be accompanied by a decrease in hip tension, which will allow your knees to drop down more. So the key to getting the knees to go down in this posture is not to push the knees down and try to force it from you don't want to overstretch the adductors to do that. You want to get the pelvis more stable, and when the pelvis is more stable, the hips will automatically begin to accommodate the position of the leg, and then the knees will start to drop down on their own. There's something about this posture when it comes together that seems to automatically begin to manifest a meditative state. I would say that you'll know when you're achieving the posture, beginning to achieve the posture, when you feel the brain and the nervous system start to relax more and the mind start to get a little quieter. Good. Stretch out your legs. And you can lie on your back. Keep a block handy. Put your pelvis up on a block. Then pull your shoulders a little further back and bring the backs of the shoulders in contact with the floor. And once you have that contact, push the shoulders into the floor and raise the upper chest. But at the same time, let the lower ribs continue to drop down toward the pelvis. So it's a little tricky to do this. You're trying to do a back bend in the chest. And the tendency when you do a back bend in the chest is always for the lumbar to try to help. So you're just trying to find a way to minimize that. And assuming you can do that and you can raise the height of the block again, you can do that as well. If it feels like going higher puts too much pressure on your low back or your sacroiliac joints, then you can stay lower down. And if you have a stable enough block, you can even go up to the top of the block and then lift the feet up, stretch your legs up into Viparita Karani. So your legs and your hips and your pelvis is working here very much like the seated postures, Dandasana, Upavishtakonasana in particular. There's almost a sense of, like if you were doing this, like a lot of times this pose is done at the wall where the backs of the legs are against the wall, because it kind of highlights that feature that you're sort of sitting with the legs and hips here and uprighting the trunk from that foundation. And meanwhile, you're continuing to create more of a backbending action in the upper chest without letting that backbend go into your lumbar. So the diaphragm works to keep the ribs anchored down in the front so they don't flare open, which then serves to direct the intra-abdominal pressure downward into the pelvis or toward the pelvis and into the pelvic floor. So the backbending action in combination with the work of the diaphragm and the abdominal muscles reinforces the sort of sitting action, if you will, in the legs and hips and pelvis. And that sitting action in the legs and hips and the pelvis in particular reinforces the back bend in the upper chest. Meanwhile, eyes, ears, tongue, soft. Relax the throat. Relax the jaw. Good. Bend your knees, bring your feet to the floor. And if you did raise the block, take it down a notch. And then just briefly stretch out the left leg. Keep the pelvis and the ribs connected here so it doesn't go into your low back. In other words, don't let the pelvis rotate or fall away from the rib cage here. Maintain a connection. And reverse the legs. shoulder blades a little further apart and down the back. Stretch out your legs. Check to see that you're lying symmetrically. And when you're satisfied that you are, then let your eyes close.